Welcome to Liberty and Order in the New Republic. This is Melinda Klein. The American Revolution had proved more egalitarian in its outcome than many of the leaders had hoped or expected it would be in 1776. At the state and local levels, segments of common folk formerly excluded from the exercise of political power were among local leaders and representatives in the newly formed government. The political majority, the moneyed and learned men of commerce, trade, and land, failed in their efforts to rein in this egalitarian trend. A tiny group of local and national leaders hoped to enlarge this interest in the common folk to the determination of disinterested natural aristocracy in the new republic, men of the Enlightenment, science, religion, and political debates. These men had invented a national government, but at every level the structures of American politics was uncertain and unproven. By 1812, Europe had been at war with Napoleonic France for close to a decade. While the American War of 1812 to 1815 with the British Empire rested in conflicts resolved before the first shots were fired, war threatened the independence of this young republic and came very close to losing its newly found political freedoms to the British Empire. The Napoleonic Wars comprised a series of global conflicts fought during Napoleon Bonaparte's imperial rule over France. They formed to some extent an extension of the wars sparked by the French Revolution of 1789. These wars revolutionized European armies and artillery, as well as military systems, took place on a scale never seen before, mainly due to the application of modern mass conscription. French power rose quickly, conquering most of Europe, and collapsed rapidly after the disastrous invasion in 1812 of Russia, and Napoleon's empire ultimately suffered complete military defeat. As a political philosopher, Jefferson idealized the independent yeoman farmer, distrusted cities and financiers, and favored states' rights and a strictly limited federal government. After returning from France, Jefferson served as the first Secretary of State under George Washington. It was obvious by the 1790s that political factions within this new government had arrived. Thomas Jefferson and James Madison rallied support by anonymously writing the Kentucky and Virginia Resolves, which declared that the federal government had no right to exercise powers not specifically delegated to it by the states. Should the federal government assume such powers, its acts under them should be voided by a state. After the Revolution, settlers kept moving west, especially towards the rich land of the Ohio River Valley area, currently occupied not only by British interests, but Indians as well. Frontier skirmishes were fought for the best land and access to natural resources, along with the rights to travel the Mississippi River. There were tight government controls to new settlers coming to the Ohio Valley. Delaware, Shawnee, and Iroquois Indians living in this area refused to cede their lands to settlers favored by government expansion. With continued interest in westward expansion, Jefferson's government was able to secure a treaty with Napoleonic France for the Louisiana Territory. By 1819, a treaty with Spain was arrived at for Florida. Working closely with Aaron Burr of New York, Jefferson rallied his party attacking new taxes especially, and stood for the presidency in 1800. Consistent with the traditions of the time, he did not formally campaign for the position. Prior to the passage of the 12th Amendment, a problem arose with the new nation's electoral system. Jefferson had tied with Burr for first place in the Electoral College, leaving the House of Representatives to decide the election. After lengthy debate with the Federalist-controlled House, Alexander Hamilton convinced his party that Jefferson would be a lesser political evil than Aaron Burr, and that such scandal within the electoral process would undermine the still young regime. The issue was resolved by the House on 17 February 1801 after 36 ballots, when Jefferson was elected president. One of Jefferson's dreams was a university designed as the capstone of the educational system of Virginia. In his vision, any citizen of the Commonwealth could attend school, with the sole criteria being ability. During the presidency of Thomas Jefferson, the size of America doubled. In negotiation for the Louisiana Territory, in Jefferson's view, Napoleonic France needed money, and the United States needed more land for the growing number of settlers that were heading west. This would, after all, make the economy stronger. In his view, purchasing the Louisiana Territory was a boost to the economy. The following year, Jefferson in 1804 was re-elected. It was during his second term for the first time that Jefferson and his popularity first plummeted. By 1807, it was estimated that 6,000 American sailors were pressed into service by the British. Jefferson wanted to stop this practice of an apparent seizure of sailors from port cities. He felt war was coming soon. After putting a bill to Congress, they passed the Embargo Act of 1807, restricting all trade with foreigners. However, this significantly affected and reduced the strength of the economy, putting approximately 80% of farmers out of business. As listed here, these are among the factors that led to the War of 1812. Britain had long been the world's preeminent naval power, confirming its victory over the French and the Spanish at the Battle of Trafalgar in 1805. In 1812, the Royal Navy had 97 vessels in American waters. The strategy of the British was to protect their own merchant shipping to and from Halifax and Canada, and to enforce a blockade of major American ports to restrict American trade. The War of 1812 between the U.S. government and the British Empire was an extension of the Napoleonic Wars in Europe between France and England. Also remember, sadly, as an unsuccessful attempt by the U.S. to invade Canada. James Madison, president at the time, was very well aware that the U.S. was unprepared for war. Their Navy was only 20 years old, and U.S. troops were humiliated in Canada by the British, the Canadians, and also Indian troops. This war was fought not only in the Great Lakes area, unopposed by Americans, but also there would be conflicts on the high seas. Washington, D.C. would be burnt to the ground. The most significant battle actually happened after the treaty was signed, but the 25-hour bombardment of Fort McHenry is one to remember at Baltimore.